Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Black Beauty Activist Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Tameka Ellington. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a scholar, empowerment speaker, author, and lover of everything Black culture. And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story before I begin. I always like to start with the story. And so I would say a little over 10 years ago, I gave birth to my baby boy, Maxwell. I had been wearing my hair out in the afro. I had just gotten rid of my first round of locks that I had for about 13 years. And so I decided that I was going to wear my hair out in the afro. And so before my son was born, I was wearing an afro out and decided that once I was going to deliver him, I wanted to have braids in my hair so that it would be a lot, less maintenance. I wouldn't have to deal with doing my hair while trying to take care of a new baby. And so I went to an African braiding shop in Cleveland, and they gave me the tightest braids I ever had in my life. The braids were so tight that I started developing little bumps on the side of my head. But my new baby that was just born ended up at 4 weeks old, going into the hospital. He had a spontaneous rupture in his lungs. And so the stress of having a new baby and now this new baby, being sick, and ended up having to be, when I took my son to the emergency room, he ended up having to be intubated, and he had to be intubated for almost a week. We were in the pediatric intensive care unit at the hospital. And so the stress of, having this new baby, the baby now being sick, and then having this hair that was just too tight for my head caused a lot of trauma to my scalp. And so I today still deal with some of the trauma that happened as a result of that. We have lots of things that go on in our lives that cause us to have various kinds of trauma in our body responds very differently. And so depending on what that issue might be that you're having will depend on how your body reacts. And so one of the things that my body did when it was under stress was it reacted, and I started to lose my hair. And so today I still, like I said, have these issues with my scalp that has not fully recovered. And like I said, it's been about 10 years now. But in today's episode, we are going to acknowledge that September is the month that we bring awareness to alopecia areata. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and I'm sure my friend who's on will make sure that she corrects me. But we want to use the platform to bring about as much awareness as possible, to give some scientific-based information that can help women. And of course, we all know that not only women suffer from alopecia, men also suffer from alopecia, but one of the big differences is they don't have to, meaning the men don't have to live up to societal standards of beauty. And thus, this journey of alopecia is something that is more traumatic on a woman, especially not only for Black women, not only having to live up to these westernized beauty standards. That's one thing. But then on top of that, having to deal with the fact that you've lost your hair is a whole nother traumatic experience for Black women. And so my guest today has worked with countless women, including myself, to help them regrow their hair. And so it is my pleasure, Black Beauty Activist, to introduce you to my friend, trichologist, Dr. Crystal Porter. All right, Dr. Porter, how are you?
Hi.
Hi.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for
Yes,
asking.
absolutely. And this, was long overdue, for us to get a chance to have a conversation on my platform. So I thank you for your patience, and I'm glad that we are finally able to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I am going to correct the alopecia
Please,
areata, but
please
first
do.
and, but first and foremost, I'm not a trichologist.
You're not.
I'm not. I'm a hair scientist.
Okay, so what's the difference? Okay, you have to educate us. What's the difference? Because when I looked up trichologists, it was hair scientists.
Yes. That's one of the reasons why I have this new organization, but we'll get into that.
Yeah,
So, the difference between me being a hair scientist and a trichologist doing the work that they do, they have more education on diseases of the hair and scalp. And my expertise, my background is in chemistry, but and I have a PhD in chemistry, but my research in graduate school was more about learning about the mechanics of materials and characteristics of materials and why they behave the way they do and external influences of their behavior. So that is my background. And so everything that I do is based on science. And then with me having a extensive stay in grad school and doing research, I did research on hair and I continue to do research on hair. So that is my background. However, a trichologist usually has more education on diseases of the hair and scalp,
I see.
but they don't necessarily practice or do research or practice science. It's not
Okay.
mandatory that they do that.
Okay. So it sounds like the difference is application. A lot of it.
Application, and I don't see clients.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And trichologists, they see clients.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay. 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 So she is here to school us, honey, because I know some things about Black hair. It's more cultural based that I know. And Dr. Crystal is here to talk to us about the science of Black hair. She's been doing this for many, many years and is very well versed in it. And she is going to school us today. But before she does, I would love to read your bio so that the people can know about the amazing work that you do, and we can jump right on into this conversation. So, Dr. Crystal Porter, PhD, is a hair scientist and owner of Main Insights Inc., where she conducts research studying the hair and scalp of people of African descent. Dr. Porter is passionate about debunking myths and empowering others to properly care for their hair. As a former cosmetic scientist with Unilever and L'Oreal USA, Dr. Porter has been able to conduct research and study biophysical characteristics of hair and pigmented populations. That means that she's been able to study hair in people with color, right? People of color, right? Okay, not only has she studied, but also contributed to the scientific community by authoring scientific papers, book chapters, and delivering presentations regarding ethnic hair. Dr. Porter earned a bachelor's degree in biochemistry from Chicago State University and a doctorate degree from Missouri University of Science and Technology in physical polymer chemistry. Armed with extensive knowledge and experience, she has created a patented process that helps professionals understand their clients' hair so that they can provide customized hair care solutions. In addition to her professional work, Dr. Porter's personal passion is educating and mentoring underrepresented youth about STEM opportunities. Part of her work with the Chicago State University Center for STEM Education and Research allows her to use her talents and training to expose students to culturally relevant research, helping them understand how STEM impacts their everyday lives. Dr. Porter is a wife and a mother of two daughters. And for fun, she loves jumping rope in the 40 plus double dutch. I love that. That is so cool. And working out at the gym. Do you know, I never learned how to double dutch. Never learned how to double dutch. And so the fact that you're doing it with the 40 plus group, that's amazing, Dr. Porter.
It's so much fun.
I'm sure.
And you don't have to think you need to know how to jump in order to join the club. There have been people who have learned. So if you like it,
Nice.
go.
Nice. Very nice.
And we do more than double dutch too.
Do you guys travel with it at all?
No. Well, so the core team from the original group that got together here in Chicago, yes, they do travel, but
Okay.
We do performances within our immediate area. So it's a bonus of being in Chicagoland. It's pretty big. So
Yeah.
we get to perform locally.
That's cool. That is so cool. That is really, really cool. I did not. Now that's something I didn't know about you. I didn't know that you were a double dutcher. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. All right. Well, welcome again, Dr. Porter. I'm gonna call you Dr. Crystal if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Dr. Crystal, thank you so much for joining me today. And we're going to jump into this interview. And uh, I know you, but the people watching may not know you. Please talk a little bit about your background, how you grew up, what got you started in wanting to become a researcher and scientist in the hair industry.
Yeah. So, how I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My husband reminds me all the time that I cannot claim that I'm a Chicagoan because I did not go to high school in Chicago. So even though I learned how to jump
Mm.
double dutch in Chicago and I came back for my undergraduate studies, he says that my stint in high school disqualifies me for claiming Chicago as my hometown. So I'm like, okay, fine.
What high school did you
So
go to?
I went to high school in Michigan City. At the time, it was
Oh,
called Rogers High School. So in
okay.
Indiana, actually. Yeah.
That's funny. So, what
Yeah.
got you started in wanting to be a researcher?
So I did not know that my path would bring me to hair research at all. That was off of my radar. I did not get the memo that that was even an option for me. But I knew as an undergraduate student that I did not want to be a lab or bench chemist. So
Mm,
while I excelled in chemistry, I did not like the process of just mixing chemicals and doing that. So I found my passion while being an undergraduate student. When I did an internship, I was able to see someone, a material scientist actually, talk about how she was playing with different plastics and the changes in the plastics and what affected them. And she was, studying how they broke and how the molecules affected how durable it was or how much strength it had. And so I was like, that's what I want to do. So
mm,
that is why I ended up going to grad school and pursued my PhD. I didn't even know I wanted to get a PhD at the time. It was my
mhm.
advisor who empowered me to know that that was something that I was capable of. So I went straight from my bachelor's to a PhD and
Wow.
had my baby while in grad school. Actually, I went to grad school pregnant.
Mm.
So I don't know if I would advise that for anyone.
Yeah, I actually gave birth to my first son while I was ABD. I had just gotten ABD and my baby was born.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Mhm. So I get it, sis. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
So, yeah. So I came out thinking I had two job offers actually when I was finishing up. One was to work for General Motors, so for GM up in Michigan, and I was ready to take that job offer. And they flew my husband and I out and was like, okay, we'll have her for the day. You just go around, told my husband to go around. And after my interview, he was like, you can take this job and be in Michigan all by yourself because I am not moving here. So to be honest, by default, I the job at Unilever. And I haven't looked back. I had no idea that my background and interest in material science would translate to understanding the biomaterial properties of hair, because hair is a
Mm.
material.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, I haven't looked back. It has been fascinating. There's so much to learn because I always say there are more questions than there are answers.
Mhm.
So the sky is the limit in terms of what can be done. So
Mhm.
how I
Mhm.
got to start. And then I
Wow.
worked at Unilever for about 2.5 years. And then when the L'Oreal Institute for Ethnic Hair and Skin Research was opened, I was one of the first scientists there and continued to study. Yep.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. And because my background is in fashion, textile science, is something that's very big in the fashion industry. So
Mhm.
that almost kind of is very connected in. So people that
Yeah.
do textile research, science, like, looking at fabric finishes and things like that, that's all science based. And people don't think that fashion is a STEM field, but it definitely is a STEM field.
It's interesting you say that because
Mhm.
a lot of the research in hair is conducted by an organization called the Textile Research Institute, and they
Yeah.
do studies on hair.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Because the fiber that was the main fiber that was studied was wool
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the properties of wool. So they had to understand, how that textile functioned under what conditions and how could it be dyed and last and yeah, so all of that. So yeah.
Wow. 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 So tell us about your company, Main Insights. What do you do with Main Insights?
Yeah, so as a hair scientist, I still conduct research. So even though I am no longer with L'Oreal, it is still a passion of mine. And I had to be creative in how I was going to continue to do research because coming from corporate America, there are resources there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those type of resources I don't necessarily have myself. So I had to get creative and I partner with hair practitioners, mainly trichologists, which is
Uh-huh.
probably one of the reasons why you thought I was a trichologist because I would say those are my circle of friends.
Yeah.
And I really believe in what they do and their passion. However, what I discovered was that even though trichology is based on science, they aren't necessarily taught science during the
Wow.
curriculum of their education. So most of them, not all, have backgrounds in cosmetology, and they definitely aren't introduced to it there. Uh, but when you go into trichology, it really depends upon the educational entity or institution if there is one, that you have gotten your education from, which will dictate the quality of education that you
Mhm.
have. But what I can say is most of them have not been versed in science and research. They are given information, and a lot of them are good at regurgitating the information that they've learned. But the critical thinking that's needed to do scientific research and to really contribute to the scientific community, most of the time that is not there. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why I was like, okay, I need to collaborate with them because there are people in need of their
Mhm.
services. But at the same time, when someone would ask me for a referral, it would be very difficult for me to give a referral because a lot of times the way they spoke about things would not align with my training and what I knew. And so I found that there was a need to educate trichologists a little bit more, or for those who I consider serious and conscientious about the field. I wanted
Mhm.
them to be empowered with more information so that when I did make a referral, I would not have my name and my reputation on the line.
On the line. Yeah. Wow. And so that's like that flows right into my next question because you, with several other ladies, whom many of them are trichologists, right?
Correct.
You all developed the Association of Professional Trichologists. And when I was listening in on your introduction to the association, one of the things that I remember you all saying was the fact that you want to be able to regulate the education around trichology.
So, regulate is probably the wrong word because when I think of regulation, I think
Or
about going
standardize, maybe
yes,
standardize. Yeah,
standardized for
standardize.
sure. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
standardized for sure. It's tricky to do it the regulatory route just because it's a slow process and you have to prove it. And then when it's regulated, you have to adhere to things that are more political as opposed to what is right and good for
Mhm.
everyone involved, meaning the
Mhm.
professionals and those who are taken care of. So I was saying during one of our lives, I don't remember which one because I've been talking about it a lot, but during one of the lives, I was talking about how when there is a sporting activity and people with a passion want to get together and they make the rules of the game, you don't have to have it regulated by the state or the government. You look and see what is best for the game, and you get together with other passionate people and you come together and you lay those standards out and you make those rules and you adhere to them as long as you are a part of that particular game, or if you're going to
Yeah.
play it in the right way. And so what we're doing is, as you said, standardizing some of the education and the practices of the industry, because right now it's all over the place. Unfortunately, you can take a 1 day or weekend course in trichology. You can get a website, call yourself a trichologist, and
Mm.
start getting clients.
Mm.
And a lot of people do have the gift of gab, and they're able to be very convincing and not really have the competencies or the background or experience to effectively help someone.
Mm.
So it's
Wow.
extremely important that the standards are there. And
Right.
I have heard enough professionals say that they wanted change, but I have been working with trichologists for 8-ish years now, and nothing has happened.
Mm.
Everyone is saying this is a need, this is a need. And so, with me doing research and with me looking overseas, because unfortunately, we don't have those standards here, but they exist in other countries. Not
Yeah.
all countries, but some. And so there's a model that already exists that's doing it right.
Mm.
So for the sake of those who are in need of hair advice, hair I'll say treatments in the sense that that they need to be guided in terms of the right equipment, the right regimen, the right products. I mean, people need to be educated and they need to incorporate science in with their recommendations and understand
Mm.
that there is a difference between something that is evidence based and something that just sounds or looks good.
Wow. Mm. Yeah. Wow. And when you think about the fact that there is no standard, that's putting a lot of people at risk,
Yeah.
puts a lot of people at risk because the work that trichologists do is very sensitive work,
Yeah.
very, it could be controversial work. It could be work that makes or breaks someone's self-esteem, and so to have that person not be standard under some standardization that again regulates the field, that's difficult, and it could people a lot of people can be harmed, you know in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Wow. So we're going to talk a little bit about hair loss in Black women. As I mentioned, this is alopecia. How do you pronounce it?
Ariata.
Areata. Alopecia Areata Awareness Month. So, for those of the people that are watching, can you talk a little bit about what that is and how are some people susceptible to that type of hair loss, and what might be some remedies that they could go after when they're dealing
Yeah.
with that?
So, alopecia areata is an autoimmune disease. And like most autoimmune diseases, your body attacks itself. And so, in this case, the immune system attacks the hair follicles. And so, we really don't know why some people are more susceptible to it than others. However, it does seem to be a relationship to having other autoimmune diseases such
Mm,
as vitiligo, psoriasis, and different thyroid diseases.
mm,
Also, it can be genetic as well.
mm,
But they've also found, and I'm always looking out for myself because I suffer from hay fever, but there's also a relationship between having alopecia areata and hay fever, and
Really?
some types, yeah, and asthma as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I
Not,
wonder
not
what
to
the
say that you
connection.
will, but there
Yeah.
is a relationship seen.
That's interesting. And so I was looking at some research, and um, I'm a researcher too, but not a scientist. So Dr. Crystal is going to give us the real information. So I saw a 2016 research article by the American Academy of Dermatologists says that um, Black women living with various forms of alopecia or other forms of hair loss is about 47% of Black women. Is that true? Have you found that that's true? Or, it seems like that's a big number,
Mhm.
47%.
So, yeah, so I get my information from the AAD, which is the American Academy of Dermatology. And
Okay.
so if they have that stat, they must have, looked at their data within their systems and
Hmm.
came up with that number. That is
Yeah,
really high. I do
that is
agree.
high.
But when I think about how many people are suffering in silence and how many people, I
Mhm.
talked about being a 40 plus double dutcher, right? There are people who I jump double dutch with who have problems and they'll pull me aside and say, hey, I want to talk to you about, something that's going on with me. But I didn't get a chance, and I apologize because I paused, but I didn't get a chance to talk about some of the ways that you can treat or you can do something about alopecia
Yeah,
areata.
yeah,
And
please. Yeah.
so the one thing that I did want to say before we move on is most of the time you need to see a board certified dermatologist to make sure that you have the correct diagnosis and for
Mhm.
them to understand the extent in which how severe is the actual
Mhm.
problem. And
Mhm.
so the less severe cases, you can get minoxidil over the counter, right? And so most people know that is Rogaine. So you can get that over the counter, and sometimes the doctor will prescribe for you to do that. Also, they use topical steroids, a corticosteroid,
Mhm.
to decrease the inflammation in the area. And sometimes they do corticosteroid injections as well.
Mhm.
But if you have more severe alopecia areata, and sometimes it extends into the eyebrows and sometimes your eyelashes. And so there are oral medications. They have approved JAK inhibitors. There are a couple of more. They have contact immunotherapy drugs that can be used. So there are different options, but you would have to see a board certified dermatologist. And oftentimes, it's good to find a dermatologist that specializes in hair loss because some dermatologists just have more education and are kept abreast of the new research to best serve their patients. So,
Mhm. And I will add into that a dermatologist that specializes in working with Black hair.
yeah. So,
Because, all the things that you just described, the shots, the cortisone shots, the topical solutions, the what else? The Rogaine, all of those things. I've tried all of that stuff. So I know firsthand about exactly what you were just talking about. And I remember going to a dermatologist who was a white guy, and didn't know much about Black hair. And so, because I didn't feel like he was competent enough to really be able to help me the way that I needed to be helped, I went to another dermatologist who just so happens to be a Black woman, thinking that I was going to be able to get, the service that I needed to get, and still wasn't able to get the service. And so when you're having that kind of a challenge, it's really important that you match yourself up with the right person. That's what I'm trying to get at. Match yourself up with the right dermatologist, because um, you need somebody that understands Black hair, and then you need somebody that is pretty empathetic, to those that are going through these kinds of things. So, yeah.
So I would say I'm very fortunate because in my circles, I have met non-Black dermatologists who are very competent
Okay.
and well versed in what is going on with the Black population.
Okay.
So while I do understand the level of comfort and that empathy is oftentimes there when you are seeing someone who firsthand can understand what you may be going through, there are some competent Caucasian or even, I would say professionals of other persuasions who would be able
Mm-hmm.
to serve well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say finding a referral is probably the best way to get someone who is competent for your needs.
Right. Right. Yeah. So a lot of these questions, like I said, these are things that I've dealt with over time. My story, my situation, and that kind of thing. And so a lot of these questions that I have are almost kind of selfish. It's like I need to know these things, because I need to know for my own self. But one of the things that I've been curious about is this new red light therapy that's on the market now. You can purchase it, and it's like a helmet that you can put on. There is a brush that you can use that has the red light therapy. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on the red light therapy. Have you noticed that it works? And have you noticed that it works for Black people?
Yeah. So the answer to your question that addresses both is it depends, because no matter what type of therapy you're getting to help with hair loss, some treatments are good for some and not others.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know why some people are more susceptible to hair loss, and we don't know why some treatments are more effective than others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, to
Mm-hmm.
answer your question, there is data that shows that it does work, but it's not 100%. And
Mm-hmm.
we don't know why.
Yeah.
And the and Black hair grows the same as any other hair type, and so there aren't any differences there. It's just a matter of understanding why it works with some and not others. So yes, it is effective with some people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. And I was reading a study by John Hopkins, and they were talking about that they found that women who have traction alopecia were 5 more times likely to also have fibroids. Have you heard about this research, or what are your thoughts about this? So this came from John Hopkins. Uh, Women who have traction alopecia are 5 times more likely to also have fibroids.
Now, I thought it was another type of alopecia called central centrifugal cicatricial alopecia
Okay.
that was where they saw the correlation with
Okay.
fibroids. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But
What is that? Please tell us, because I don't
yeah.
know what is that.
So I want to talk about traction
Yeah.
alopecia as well as, well, they call it CCCA for short, because who can say central centrifugal cicatricial alopecia? So um, So traction alopecia and CCCA are probably the two most popular, or what is more prevalent with women of African descent compared to any other type of alopecia. And so traction alopecia, it results from pulling the hair oftentimes.
Mhm.
But it's interesting because those of us who are more susceptible to it, like for example, I have a condition called seborrheic dermatitis, and that means my scalp becomes inflamed. It starts to
Mm.
really flake, so to speak, and it's very unpleasant. And some people have a tendency to want to scratch it up and
Mm.
but that makes the condition worse. You really
Yeah.
need to try to get to the source of the problem, which is the inflammation, and not make it
Mhm.
worse by scratching
Mhm.
it. And so I'm more susceptible to traction alopecia just because I do have seborrheic dermatitis. That is my hypothesis, but more data is coming out that supports that when people have those types of conditions, it can make the follicles weaker and not allow the
Mm,
hair to be held into the follicle the way that it should. That's fractional alopecia. Now, central centrifugal cicatricial alopecia is a condition that is a scarring alopecia,
mm,
and it presents itself usually like in the crown of the head. And most people with that, so it is centrifugal, meaning that it starts small and then it starts to circulate out and get bigger
mhm.
and bigger. And we don't really know why some people are more susceptible. However, there has been research that shows that there is a genetic component to that as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
And fibroids?
And so what I was reading about that particular article is because people with fibroids and also with CCCA, they they present with what's called abnormal proliferation of fibrous tissue.
Mm,
So they have more fibrous tissue that is an overgrowth, basically. And
mm,
so it could be related to hormones as well, but more research is needed to understand. But that was a correlation that was seen looking at people's charts and looking at the data and saying, okay, here are people who came in for CCCA, and then looking at the chart, oh, wow, there's a significant amount of them that also suffer from fibroids. So
mm.
sounds like it's something underlying that's going on with the body that we need to understand.
Wow. Wow. Now, the CCCA uh, alopecia, is that also caused by chemicals? Is that what it's, does chemicals start that or?
So there have been people who suffer from it who have never had
Mm,
quote unquote chemical. And
yeah.
I, you
Yeah.
know, as a chemist,
Yep.
I oftentimes have to defend chemicals because water
Yes.
is a chemical that we
Yes.
need.
Yes. Yes.
And it's just a matter of trying to understand what our bodies can tolerate. And the more research that's coming out, we are uniquely built and have our own specificities, so to speak. And it's very difficult to understand why some people have nut allergies, why
Mm,
some people have a negative response to a product that is fine for everyone else.
mhm,
So, and it seems like as more time goes on, we're learning more, and it seems like everybody is becoming more allergic to other things. So, a lot of people think it's environmental. It's a
mm,
lot of things that's going on. Our food has changed, our habits in terms of how we eat has changed.
mhm. Yep.
There's a lot of different variables that are going on in our life, and it's really hard to pinpoint the cause, but it's something there, and we need to understand. And that's one of the reasons why there's a more focus on precision medicine. And precision medicine is personalized medicine, so not a one size fits all approach.
Mhm, mhm,
Allows people to understand the individual and then to be very specific and consider the individuality of people when they give whatever treatment recommendations.
mm. Now, for ladies that are living with various forms of alopecia or other forms of hair loss, are there support groups that you know of that can help these ladies? Do you ever refer any of the people that you've worked with to support groups or anything like that? So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. And oh my gosh, the support groups are really needed. I don't think people realize, and most of the people in there are women. And you spoke to it earlier when you talk
Hmm.
about societal norms.
Hmm.
However, some men really are affected when they lose their hair as well.
Wow. Yeah.
And so there are support groups, mostly women are there, but I always recommend people to Dr. Victoria Barbosa, who is in the Chicagoland area, but there are dermatologists that do specialize in hair loss or hair problems. And there is a resource called blackdermdirectory.com.
Mm.
So blackdermdirectory.com. And you can put in a search for the state you're in. You can put in what type of ailment that particular physician has an expertise in, and then up pops up derms with those expertise that you may be in need of. So that is another source of possibly getting to a support group, because a lot of dermatologists who do have expertise in hair loss, they will oftentimes have on the side, different groups that they will periodically get together with and talk through some of the issues.
Blackdermdirectory.com.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'll make sure that I put that in the show notes for those of you that are watching, so that you can have access to that. But that's a wonderful resource, especially too now, thinking about people that are not living in larger cities like Chicago, that may not have access to,
Yeah.
a big group like that. Like, I live in a smaller city, and support groups, especially for something like that, may not necessarily be, possible around here, unless I were to start one myself, or something like that. But it's good to know that there's possibly like other ways of getting support. And now, since we've had COVID, a lot of things are virtual, so there may even be virtual support groups that women can become a part of.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So yeah, so I'll do some research about some virtual support groups, and then I'll also post those in the show notes for you all. Okay. And so we have come to a close with our interview. I wanted to find out if you had anything that you would like to discuss that we didn't talk about. Is there anything important that you feel like women need to know in regards to alopecia, or just anything that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, so a lot of, I shouldn't say that. So we talked about traction alopecia, and
Hmm.
traction alopecia is self-induced,
Yeah.
or I shouldn't say self-induced. Sometimes there are little girls who are getting their hair done and they didn't ask for the braids to be so tight. So just making sure that you realize that you should not be able to, have your face all pulled back tight because your braids have been installed. And you shouldn't have to take aspirin or
Yeah.
Tylenol so that you can
Hmm.
sleep on them. If that is the case, they are too
Too
tight.
tight. Hmm.
And I know, because I've experienced this, where you get your hair braided and you think while they're braiding it that it's okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then over time, you're like, oh my
Oh
God,
my
this is
gosh.
tighter than I thought. Because
Hmm.
you're feeling the sensation of the braiding
Yeah.
of the braider.
Right.
And
Hmm.
you don't realize until it's all done that, oh my God, this is tight.
It's too tight.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so try to be more aware. But the other thing that I have to say, because I'm always on my soapbox saying this, and that is, I had a reoccurring theme, and that is, we need to learn more. We need to learn more. And so in order for us to learn more, we need more Black people in research. And it's not
Mhm.
for hair studies, it's for our health overall.
Yeah.
For good reason, tend to stay away from studies. And I do understand that.
Yeah.
However, we need to find trusted researchers, because we are only doing ourselves a disservice when we just flat out refuse to participate in
Mhm.
studies. So that is
Mhm.
my battle cry for everyone to consider. Please consider participating in studies.
Yeah. And like Dr. Crystal said, you know, connecting with someone who you feel comfortable, with participating, because I mean, it's for Black people, that's something that is a very sensitive topic for many of us. And so we don't trust anything, but then to have someone, supposedly kind of quote unquote testing on us, we really don't trust that. So if you can find someone that you trust, Yeah, like Dr. Crystal said, try to participate. And as a researcher myself, I know how important it is to have a good sample of people, because the research really won't be valid unless there's a good sample of people. So, if you get called on, go ahead and participate if you feel comfortable with that. Yeah. Wow.
And we have unique needs.
Yeah, we do.
So
We
on
do.
one
We
hand, we're
do.
saying our needs are being met. And then on the other hand, we're like, okay, meet our needs, but I'm not going to give you no information to help you out.
I never even thought about it like that.
You can't have both.
Right.
Yeah, you cannot
Wow.
have both.
Wow. Wow. So, how can the audience stay connected with you, Dr. Crystal, and to be able to maybe tap into some of those amazing conversations that you and the association have been having? And so, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I love LinkedIn. I don't know if it's because it's a professional networking platform, but my go-to is LinkedIn. However, I do, and I went on hiatus in May because I really started ramping up the association of professional trichologists. And so I put a pause on my regularly scheduled podcast and live that I do, which
Mm-hmm.
is the Our Black Hair Matters movement
Mm-hmm.
podcast. And I did that because I felt a calling to get the industry in a situation where more research for my business can be done. And so if practitioners know more about the science and can participate in science, then that is a win-win for everybody, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that is on hiatus, but I plan on doing a lot more because we do have unique needs and people need to know more about that. So I do
Mm-hmm.
have a YouTube channel, the Our
Yeah.
Black Hair Matters movement YouTube channel. And then I do have a website. So my company is Maine Insights, Mane Insights, Insights, so maininsights.com. And you can sign up for a newsletter there or send me a note there. And if you are a practitioner, I invite you to go to the website, the trichology.association.org website. So trichology.association.org. And you can sign up to be a member. Our goal is to make sure that you have the resources that you need to be successful as a business and a professional.
Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was on one of the lives that you all did, you were saying that you are taking members. So people can be a member, and there's various levels of membership. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so actually, there aren't different levels of membership.
Okay. I thought there was some for
Oh,
like,
well, so not really.
okay.
Let me explain it. So we have general membership, which is if you are a key stakeholder in the industry and you are involved in hair in any capacity, you can become a general member.
Mhm.
However, we do have affiliate membership, and that's for professionals who provide services. So, say insurance, you know that businesses need insurance and you want to tap into an area and you want to present maybe or network with people, then you can become a member and come to our
Mhm.
events. And then
Mhm.
we have a student level as well. So,
Okay.
you're still, in the process of trying to figure things out and get your education. So we do have a discount for student members. So while I wouldn't consider them levels because the associate membership and the general membership are the exactly same cost.
Okay.
We're
Okay.
only discounting the student membership.
Okay.
And then we also have an event coming up, and it was debatable whether or not we should have an in-person event. And the reason being one of the reasons why we decided to have the event is because even if it's short notice, because it's a launch, we felt for those who are able to come, for them to be a part of founding membership and helping to formulate and provide information that would be relevant in terms of guidance for the board members to know how we best serve the industry. we felt that it was very important to open up that dialogue and to give people an opportunity to join. We don't want people to think that it's just this elusive private board. The board consists of members in the industry. They're voted in by the members. So it's not like this board that doesn't represent people or is so political that no one can get in. So it was important for us to make that known and to have this launch event so people feel included. And with that, until Sunday, there is complimentary membership for those who come to the in-person event.
Oh, nice.
And that's all on the website, the trichologiassociation.org website.
Okay. Wow. You have a lot of things going on, all wonderful things and all connected to your main mission.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I am blessed to know you. You've been a
Thank
blessing. You've been a blessing to my life ever since I met you. And I thank you for everything that you do for Black people and the knowledge that you're constantly, putting out and wanting, to better us and to help us become more aware of ways in which we can, how can I say, ways in which we can live a better life through our hair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well put.
Yeah.
Bringing me on, and I look forward to continued relationship building and support for you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Crystal. Have a wonderful night.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So Dr. Crystal is actually going to be on with me again in a couple of weeks. She and I will be talking about the start of the lawsuit that was put in place. I think it was last year. We'll be talking, I think, around the anniversary of when the lawsuit happened for those individuals that are now involved in this lawsuit that is stating that perms, chemicals, Dr. Crystal said chemicals are all good, but those individuals that have been working with and applying to their hair these relaxers, lye relaxers, and things like that, that are now saying that they are living with fibroids. There's a lawsuit out now. If you haven't heard about it, please go and look it up. But Dr. Crystal and I will talk about that on the anniversary of the lawsuit, just to see what's happening now with it, and to get her thoughts about where the future of this thing is going to go and how it's going to impact Black people. So we'll be briefly talking about that the next time when we meet. But I am going to put on the screen Dr. Crystal's information. So she has published several articles. Many of these articles were published while she was a member working with Unilever or L'Oreal. And so if you go on researchgate.net and under Dr. Crystal's name, you can find many of her research articles that she published with her colleagues. And there's other, I'm sure if you go on her website, like she said, she has the Main Insights website. She does a podcast or YouTube channel. She has a YouTube channel, Our Black Hair Matters. And then now she has the Trichology Association. So there's so much information that you can gather from Dr. Crystal and the people that she works with, the other scientists and trichologists that she works with in her field. All of these people are doing some great work for Black people. They are helping to evolutionize the industry by the things that they're doing. And so please tap in with Dr. Crystal and the work that she is doing to better us as people. And so I wanted to also let you know this is the end of our podcast. We've come to the last parts of things, but I wanted to let you know that again, this podcast is sponsored by and brought to you by my new book, Black Hair in a White World. This book has already made a tremendous mark on the industry, and it continues to make a mark. And I'm so happy. I'm actually on tour right now with this book, going to various universities and organizations are having me come and speak about the research in this book. As I said, I'm a researcher. I look at the culture of Black hair, whereas Dr. Crystal looks at the science of Black hair. But this particular book, if you have not gotten your copy, you can get a copy on bookshop.org. That's the one that I would recommend. And the reason why I would recommend bookshop.org is because bookshop.org supports Black bookstores in your local area. So if you go on bookshop.org, and depending on whatever area you're in, whatever place, like whatever, if there's a Black bookstore close in proximity to you, bookshop.org will donate part of the proceeds of the purchase of the book to a Black owned bookstore. And so here in Akron, we have a Black owned bookstore called Elizabeth's. And so anyone in the Akron area that buys from bookshop.org, my book, Black Hair in a White World, or I have another book on there called Textures, The History and Art of Black Hair, part of the proceeds goes to Elizabeth. So please get your hot copy today if you haven't already gotten your copy. And look for me on tour. If I'm going to be in your city, I'll make sure that I keep up with making announcements about where I'm going to be. And if I'm going to be around in your city, please connect with me if you want to get in touch and, maybe get a signed copy of the book, come to the lecture that I'm going to be doing. I would love to see you and have to get a book signed for you. But the next stop that I'll be making will actually be at Kent State University. So the book Black Hair in a White World was published with the Kent State University Press. And the Kent State University Press is actually throwing me a reception on tomorrow. So I'll be at Kent State University tomorrow signing books. We'll be talking about the conceptualization of the book. So if you are in the Akron, Canton, Kent, Cleveland area, stop by Kent State University. It's going to be in the Kent State University Library on the first floor. Stop by and get a book signed, get a chance to connect with me and ask me any questions that you might like to ask in regards to Black hair culture. So I want to thank you all for watching and staying with me on this. For those of you that have been watching since I started this podcast, I really appreciate it. We are in season number 2, which I am blessed to say, and we continue to bring some critical conversations that are in relation to debunking and to, as Dr. Crystal says, she likes to say demystifying, or I like to say deconstructing it in deconstructing that westernized standard of beauty. So that's my goal, is to make sure that I can break that down in any way I possibly can, so that we as Black people can begin to live a better life and know that all beauty is beauty, not just westernized societal beauty. We all, as Black people, as other people of color, we all have a very special form of beauty that we should be proud of and that we should love. But thank you all for watching. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment for me on YouTube, share it in your circles of people who will benefit from this conversation. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Black Beauty Activist. And as always, remember that on the other side of fear is your beautiful confidence. Have a wonderful day, everybody.